Complete deal. Christian Horner takes charge of Ferrari with immediate effect after Frederick Vasseur's sacking. Stick around to discover his massive salary and the shocking clauses in his contract. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Christian Horner has not just signed a document. He has sealed an era, shifted tectonic plates within Formula One, and left a crater that will echo through the paddock for years to come. The commitment has been made, the paperwork finalized, and the pen, his pen, carved a future that no one in their wildest, most speculative predictions could have fully imagined. That signature was more than ink on paper. It was the formal declaration of a seismic betrayal, a revolutionary leap, and a silent war cry all at once. It happened in total silence, away from the constant surveillance of the motorsport world, beyond the reach of journalists and photographers who pride themselves on knowing every secret, every whisper, every tremble in the paddock. But this slipped beneath every radar. Horner arrived not as a guest, but as a man on a mission. Discreet, precise, accompanied only by a select group of legal minds and trusted figures who understood the gravity of the moment, he stepped through the hidden veins of Maranello's headquarters, passageways known only to the uppermost echelon. Not a single flashbulb caught him. Not one voice echoed his name. The entrance he used is one reserved for events that demand absolute secrecy, the kind of entrance you don't stumble upon, you're invited into it. And on the other side of that corridor, awaiting him like an unopened vault, stood the future. A room prepared with meticulous detail, lighting adjusted to perfection, leather chairs aligned, contracts laid out with surgical precision, and bottles of aged champagne sitting in silver buckets, not for ceremony, but for silent, knowing celebration. The meeting that followed wasn't short, nor was it rushed. It was calculated, intense, and filled with moments where silence said more than words. The expressions across the table weren't of negotiation, but anticipation. Ferrari's senior executives knew what was at stake. They weren't simply hiring a team principal, they were welcoming a commander, a tactician, a proven architect of dominance. The deal was structured with layers of assurances, guarantees of autonomy, promises of absolute authority, and the rarest of all offers in the Formula One world, the chance to mold an entire institution without compromise. When Horner's hand moved, when that pen touched the contract, it didn't tremble. It flowed, steady, assertive, unstoppable. A signature, bold and final, ended one saga and launched another. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The repercussions of this decision cannot be overstated. At Red Bull, Horner was more than a boss. He was the foundation, the compass, the internal firewall against chaos. But over time, that firewall began to crack. Years of internal friction had turned into daily battles. The sense of unity that once defined the team had eroded, replaced by factions, quiet disloyalties, and games of influence that bled into every layer of the organization. What used to be a fortress of innovation and speed began to feel more like a chessboard, where every move carried the weight of unseen agendas. And at the heart of that turbulence stood one name that has become impossible to ignore: Jos Verstappen. Their relationship had degenerated beyond repair. Any cordiality they once shared had been replaced by pure strategic hostility. The occasional disagreements had transformed into cold silences, forced interactions, and a palpable animosity that even neutral team members could feel. Jos was no longer content with being a supportive father or a background presence. He had become an influencer, a shadow operator trying to mold Red Bull into a one-driver team where his son's interests were not just prioritized, they were unquestioned. He lobbied engineers behind closed doors, critiqued technical decisions that didn't align with Max's preferences, and applied unspoken pressure that tilted the team's culture away from balance and toward obsession. Christian saw it all. He heard the quiet warnings. He felt the betrayal brewing behind handshakes and forced smiles. And instead of playing the long, bitter game of survival, he chose clarity. He chose to leave. This wasn't retreat. This was revolution. Walking away from Red Bull didn't feel like surrender. It felt like release. For years, he had smiled through tension, celebrated through gritted teeth, and led while navigating a minefield of egos and whispered politics. Now he was stepping into a domain that respected him not for what he could provide, but for who he is. Ferrari didn't approach him as a last resort. They pursued him as a visionary. They offered not just a position, but an empire waiting to be reborn under his command. There were no limitations, no compromises, no requests for shared control. Only full sovereignty. Behind the scenes, his transition has already begun. Conversations are being had. Names are being drafted. Strategic allies from his Red Bull tenure, individuals who remained loyal despite the internal shifts, are being quietly contacted. Analysts who know how to interpret chaos. Engineers who think 3 steps ahead. Strategists who know the scent of a title. Ferrari has approved every request, greenlit every proposal. Their faith in him is unwavering, almost reverent. For the first time in over a decade, Horner isn't negotiating for influence. He's being handed the entire machine, and invited to rebuild it in his image. Back in Milton Keynes, the impact of his departure is spreading like a controlled detonation. Nothing will look the same. Nothing will feel the same. Sponsors have already begun asking questions. Longtime collaborators are reassessing their positions. The atmosphere within the team has changed, subtly but undeniably. Verstappen, the 3-time world champion and cornerstone of the operation, has not commented publicly. But behind the curtain, he is reportedly unsettled. Jos, by contrast, is quietly celebrating what he sees as an open path to further consolidate power. But others within the team are whispering a different story, that without Horner's structure, Red Bull could soon face internal collapse. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. This wasn't just a managerial shift. It was a declaration of war, a tearing down of old walls. Christian is no longer part of a divided dynasty. He is now the architect of a resurrection. Ferrari is giving him the weapons, the army, and the autonomy to reshape its very DNA. He doesn't want to replicate Red Bull's model, he wants to transcend it. His ambitions are not about vengeance, but domination. He isn't interested in nostalgia. He is interested in results. Brutal, irrefutable, relentless results. He is not coming to adapt. He is coming to command. He won't tiptoe through tradition. He will challenge it, sharpen it, and weaponize it. He has no need to look over his shoulder anymore. No politics to navigate. No power plays to defend against. Only an open horizon, a scarlet uniform, and the singular mission of bringing Ferrari back to the summit, not with flair, but with calculated surgical precision. The paddock hasn't seen the full force of Horner unleashed. But they're about to. Although the agreement has already been signed and all critical details have been solidified through a series of confidential negotiations, Ferrari remains completely silent, refusing to disclose any official statement or acknowledgement of what could be one of the most consequential decisions in the team's modern history. This isn't hesitation. It isn't indecision. It's an incredibly choreographed act of silence, a pause calculated to the second. What appears to the outside world as inexplicable delay is, in fact, an exquisitely orchestrated maneuver, designed not only to avoid chaos but to build suspense, shape perception, and control the unfolding narrative with surgical precision. Behind the polished exterior of Ferrari's headquarters, a storm is being managed, not avoided, but redirected, and at the heart of this carefully contained tempest is the quiet but imminent exit of Frederic Vasseur. Despite still being listed as team principal and continuing to participate in high-level meetings, engineering briefings, and paddock activities, Vasseur is no longer the man truly in command. Insiders familiar with the situation confirm that he has already been discreetly informed of the board's irreversible decision. It was not a public conversation, not a heated confrontation. It was a carefully worded, unofficial indication, given to prepare him for what's coming while allowing the organization to maintain a calm exterior. His dismissal, however, is anything but simple. It is being handled with extreme caution, as the legal department is methodically dissecting every contractual clause and subparagraph to ensure there's no possibility of legal backlash, no loopholes for dispute, no reason for arbitration or damaging headlines. The company's legal counsel knows full well that any error, even the slightest procedural misstep, could trigger a lawsuit, jeopardize Ferrari's public image, and potentially derail the planned transition before it even begins. So Vasseur remains. Not in power, but in place. A placeholder. A temporary figure allowed to maintain appearances until the machinery behind the scenes finishes setting the stage. The decision-makers at the top of the Ferrari hierarchy understand the stakes and are refusing to rush this process. They know that a premature announcement, even one filled with optimism and strategic language, could raise unnecessary questions, create internal friction, or worse, signal instability at a time when the team is finally showing signs of consistency. Recent performances have hinted at progress. The SF25 is no longer the unpredictable beast it once was. Charles Leclerc has been sharper, more composed. Carlos Sainz is delivering with a resilience that wasn't always there last season. Together, they're consistently finishing in the points, sometimes pushing for podiums. The team isn't winning championships yet, but they're climbing, and with that upward trajectory comes pressure to maintain stability, even if it's only an illusion for now. Ferrari cannot afford to look fractured. Not now. Not when the narrative could so easily slip from rising contender to internal chaos. That's why every decision is being triple-checked, every word vetted, every potential reaction from the media simulated. It's a tightrope walk between transparency and strategy, truth and performance. The timing has to be flawless. The optics must be mastered. This is no ordinary staffing change. It's the beginning of a reinvention, and the story Ferrari wants to tell needs to be one of control, vision, and unstoppable momentum. And that's where Christian Horner enters the picture. But not yet. His shadow already looms large over Maranello, but he has not been summoned forward. Not until every last legal detail surrounding Vasseur's exit is finalized, documented, and internally ratified. Not until the board signs off on the termination package with total certainty that it will not trigger a firestorm. Until then, Horner waits in the wings, ready to step into a role that has been designed not just for a leader, but for a game changer. The anticipation inside the team's inner circle is palpable. Plans are being made, materials are being drafted, visuals are being designed. The communications team has already begun crafting a launch event that is being described as unprecedented in Ferrari's history. A spectacle that will blur the line between a Formula One press conference and a global brand relaunch. When the announcement finally happens, it won't be just another footnote in the 2025 season. It will be a cultural moment. The scale of the rollout will be massive. Invitations will go out to global media outlets. Journalists will be briefed in advance with embargoed materials. Custom videos, archival footage, brand new slogans, and aesthetic redesigns will all be unveiled in a masterclass of corporate storytelling. This will not be a mere change in personnel, it will be a declaration of intent. Ferrari will not present Horner as the man replacing Vasseur. That would be too small, too reductive. He will be framed as a visionary, a reformer, someone brought in not just to manage operations but to overhaul everything from the technical department to the psychological culture that surrounds the team. And this is not hyperbole. Horner's arrival will send shockwaves through the Formula One world. His name alone evokes polarizing opinions. Revered by some, despised by others, he is impossible to ignore. His track record with Red Bull speaks for itself. Multiple world championships, a relentless pursuit of dominance, an uncanny ability to orchestrate complex team dynamics and pull the best from the most volatile talents. To bring him into Ferrari is not a step, it's a leap. A statement. A challenge to the status quo. The announcement will trigger headlines worldwide, ignite debates across every motorsport forum, and cause tremors in rival teams' war rooms. Will he be accepted by the loyal Tifosi? Will he clash with the old guard engineers in Maranello? Will he be given the freedom to build, or will internal resistance clip his wings? These are the questions everyone will ask, but Ferrari already has the answers. They are not bringing Horner in to adapt. They are bringing him in to disrupt, to confront legacy systems, to rebuild trust, to eliminate deadweight and usher in a new philosophy, one that refuses to accept excuses and demands results. He won't walk in quietly. He won't sit in the back of meetings taking notes. From the first day, he will assume control with the confidence of someone who knows that Ferrari didn't just offer him a contract. They handed him the keys to a kingdom that desperately needs conquering. There will be no soft launch, no easing into the role. Horner will take the spotlight, flanked by executives and drivers alike, under the blinding flash of 100 cameras. He'll deliver a speech crafted to provoke emotion, determination, and pride, not just in the team, but in the millions who wear red every race weekend. This will be the rebirth of Scuderia Ferrari. Not with whispers or empty promises, but with action, ambition, and the arrival of a leader ready to leave behind comfort, controversy, and old alliances to take on the most sacred challenge in motorsport. Every second of delay, every moment of secrecy, every layer of silence, it all leads to this. Not just the changing of the guard, but the ignition of a revolution. The hour was late, the streets of London bathed in a soft orange glow from the street lamps, and inside a secluded, highly secure penthouse perched above the city, an extraordinary dialogue was unfolding, one that could reshape the very fabric of Formula One's future. There was no media presence, no corporate entourage, No trace of the polished formalities typical of high-level motorsport negotiations. The air was hushed, private, and charged with a peculiar mix of intensity and anticipation. Christian Horner had chosen the setting carefully, deliberately eliminating every external distraction. It was just him and Lewis Hamilton, two men with decades of F1 history between them, now sitting opposite one another not as adversaries, not even as professionals merely conducting business, but as two visionaries poised at a crossroads. The wine was rich and aged, the silence between them comfortable yet razor-sharp. From the first glance across the table, Horner's eyes didn't waver. He didn't bother with warm-up lines or strategic flattery. He went straight to the core, speaking with the kind of certainty that only comes from months of internal deliberation. "You," he said, locking eyes with Hamilton in a moment that seemed to pause time itself, "have always been the one. You're not just part of this. You're the entire reason I stepped into this chaos. Ferrari isn't seeking adjustments, it's starving for a revolution. And that revolution begins with you, and only you." Hamilton didn't interrupt. He didn't lean back or deflect with humor. His expression turned still, almost unreadable, yet his focus intensified. For a man who had heard every pitch, every promise, every carefully rehearsed offer thrown at him over his illustrious career, something about Horner's words pierced differently. They weren't scripted. They weren't sanitized. They were the distilled thoughts of a man willing to risk everything to ignite a new era. And that caught Hamilton's attention more than any number, more than any contract term ever could. But Horner wasn't finished. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to recruit, to seduce, not with glamour, but with power, with control, with legacy. "We're not adapting you to the machinery," he continued, voice low but unwavering. "We're re-engineering the entire concept around your touch, your rhythm, your instincts." Downforce adjustments? Already underway. Rear-end predictability? Being overhauled. Corner entry sharpness? We're tuning it like a violin until it sings to your feedback. No more compromises. No more setup battles. No more questioning your tools. The moment you step into the cockpit, it will feel like an extension of your nervous system. Every bolt, every aerodynamic surface, every software update, coded to mirror your preferences. Still, Hamilton remained reserved, nodding slightly, processing everything not just as a driver, but as a master strategist. This wasn't about speed alone. This was about influence. About empire building. About crafting a monument in red that would endure long after helmets were hung and engines silenced. Then, calmly and inevitably, he asked the question hanging invisibly in the room, "And what about Charles?" There was no hesitation. Horner's reply was firm, unwavering, and coldly precise. "Leclerc will be part of the project, of course. He'll receive upgrades. He'll get development paths. But not first. Not simultaneously. You're the touchstone. The others follow. They adapt. You lead. We don't have the luxury of waiting for balance or harmony. We need direction. And that direction, our momentum, our ambition, our blueprint for domination, it's you. You are not being invited to coexist. You are being positioned to command. This isn't a shared mission. This is your machine, your vision, your dynasty to forge." There was no anger in Horner's tone, no malice toward Leclerc, but there was an unmistakable finality. The message was brutal in its clarity. Ferrari would no longer be a team split between two equal contenders. It would be recast into a single-force operation, and that force would revolve entirely around Lewis Hamilton. The magnitude of that shift could not be overstated. For years, Ferrari had danced a delicate political ballet between their drivers, attempting balance, managing egos, often at the cost of performance. Horner was burning that playbook to ashes. He didn't want harmony. He wanted dominance. And to get it, he was prepared to install Hamilton as the undisputed king of Maranello's kingdom. The atmosphere in the suite thickened with implication. The weight of history pressed against the walls. No contracts exchanged hands. No signatures penned onto paper. Yet something far more binding had been set in motion. A mutual understanding. An unspoken pact forged not in ink, but in ambition. The wine sat nearly untouched. The words between them carried more intoxication than any alcohol ever could. From the view above the river, the city moved on below them, unaware that in this room, the seeds of a monumental power shift were being sown in absolute secrecy. Hamilton's silence wasn't indifference, it was calculation. He wasn't deciding if he was wanted. He was deciding whether this was the platform worthy of his final, most defining chapter. Because this wasn't just about another title. This was about rewriting legacy. About immortalizing his impact in red stitching, carbon fiber, and silver trophies hoisted under the Scuderia banner. What Horner offered was not a seat, it was authorship. It was the chance to leave behind not just a racing record, but a legend. And beneath it all, perhaps most provocatively, was the sheer audacity of Horner's belief. A belief that a British icon, a symbol of Mercedes' dominance, would be the torchbearer for Ferrari's renaissance. That he could not only win in red but rebuild it from its very foundation. Not as a passenger on a team's journey, but as the very architect of its rebirth. And if Hamilton were to say yes, the world wouldn't know for weeks, maybe months. But the shift had already begun, quietly, powerfully, irreversibly. Leclerc has already become aware of the internal discussions that are circulating within the team, and it hasn't taken long for a growing sense of discontent to settle in around him. His demeanor, once calm and composed in meetings and interviews, has become noticeably more intense. There's a weight behind his words now, a sharpness in his glances that wasn't there before. Those closest to him, his trusted confidants, performance engineers, longtime physio, and even a few mechanics who have been with him since his early days at the Scuderia, have begun to pick up on his subtle shifts in mood. The ambience around him is no longer relaxed or quietly optimistic. It's tense, charged, full of whispered conversations behind closed doors and careful looks exchanged in the corridors of Maranello. The rumor that Hamilton is already being positioned to receive priority when it comes to aerodynamic improvements has shaken Leclerc to the core. And while it may not yet be official policy, the direction of development and the tone of engineering briefings are beginning to paint a worrying picture. For Charles, this isn't just a tactical issue, it's deeply personal. He's not merely another driver in red, he is, in many ways, the emotional heartbeat of Ferrari's long-term revival project. He's endured years of difficult races, heartbreaks at Monza, gut-wrenching DNFs while leading, and relentless comparisons to legends of the past. Through all of that, he has remained loyal, more than loyal in fact. He has symbolized hope for a fanbase that has waited far too long for triumph. So to even sense that the team could shift its weight behind Hamilton, no matter how subtle or nuanced, is not just a professional concern. It feels like a slow erosion of everything he sacrificed for. In recent technical discussions, that frustration has started to bleed through in unmistakable ways. Where Charles once asked questions with curiosity, he now demands answers with urgency. When engineers present telemetry or simulation outcomes that align with Lewis's preferences, whether it's ride height adjustments, front wing configurations, or power unit deployment strategies, Leclerc doesn't sit back and nod. He interrogates every line, scrutinizes every variable, and questions whether the analysis has been truly impartial. He's requested independent reviews of simulator runs. He's asked for cross-reference telemetry from practice sessions that were previously considered closed cases. And increasingly, he's begun requesting changes to his setup that deviate from the team's baseline, a clear message that he no longer fully trusts the collective direction. The result is a rapidly emerging divide within the team, one that's quiet, polite, and still hidden from public view, but growing stronger with every meeting, every test run, every upgrade shipment. Engineers who were once aligned in philosophy are beginning to form ideological factions. Some gravitate toward Leclerc's camp, drawn by his passion, his history with the team, and his emotional investment in the car's future. Others, recognizing the strategic influence and global attention that Hamilton naturally brings, have started to tilt toward his corner of the garage. It's not that anyone has openly declared sides, yet, but the undercurrents are impossible to ignore. There are subtle delays in response times, extra care being taken with data handed to Lewis, and strategic debriefs that feel weighted in favor of one driver's preferences over the others. And all of this is unfolding before Christian Horner has even stepped foot inside Ferrari's headquarters in an official capacity. The anticipation of his arrival is already casting shadows over every aspect of internal operations. People are nervous, some hopeful, others deeply apprehensive. Horner's reputation precedes him, a master strategist, an expert in driver management, and someone who has shown time and time again that he knows how to build a championship-winning team, but often at the cost of intra-team harmony. Leclerc, fully aware of the political calculus that comes with a change at the helm, is preparing for the storm before the lightning has even struck. He knows exactly how these stories unfold. He's watched them from afar and felt their ripple effects in the paddock for years. The energy inside the Ferrari garage is now fractured, a far cry from a unified front it once projected. And while the public face remains polished, with social media posts of camaraderie and scripted interviews of mutual respect, those in the inner circle know the truth. The body language is different. The eye contact is fleeting. The smiles don't last as long. And every time Charles sees Hamilton walking toward the engineering station, surrounded by a growing cluster of attentive personnel, he feels the temperature drop a few degrees. Not because of fear, because of the realization that trust, once lost, is nearly impossible to rebuild. Ferrari is entering a critical phase where its internal equilibrium is at risk of imploding before a single major regulation change even takes effect. The narrative surrounding Hamilton's arrival was supposed to be one of elevation, unity, and resurgence. Instead, it's becoming one of delicate division, whispered resentment, and tactical one-upmanship. Leclerc now understands that this is no longer a race just against time, rivals, or Red Bull. It's a race for relevance, for recognition, for respect within his own garage. Every pushback he makes, every comment he gives to the press laced with just a touch of subtext, every look he shares with his race engineer, it all means something now. It all carries weight. The fans haven't noticed the full scale of the tension yet. But it's coming. The cracks will widen. The heat of the championship will magnify every small decision, every marginal gain, every shift in bodywork and balance. And if Ferrari isn't careful, the civil unrest brewing behind the scenes could explode into full-blown conflict, one that no team principal, no matter how politically savvy, will be able to contain. Leclerc isn't going to fade quietly. He's invested too much, dreamed too long, and endured too many setbacks to watch his moment slip away in favor of a legacy project built around someone else. And if the team forces him into a corner, they might just discover that the man they once viewed as Ferrari's future is also the one most capable of disrupting it from within. While the storm continues to build around him, Christian Horner moves through it with the unwavering poise of a man who's been battle-hardened by nearly 2 decades at the highest echelon of motorsport. The rumors intensify. The paddock buzzes with half-truths and speculative glances. The whispers echo through motorhomes and across hospitality suites like wildfire, yet Horner doesn't break stride. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't let the pressure distort his vision. For others, this environment would feel like a minefield of uncertainty. For him, it's familiar territory, an arena in which he not only survives but thrives. Turbulence doesn't rattle him, it fuels him. It sharpens his senses. It reminds him that he's operating in a realm where excellence is demanded, not requested. As colleagues grow tense and rivals circle like vultures sensing a shift in the power structure, Horner remains focused, not on damage control, not on deflection, but on execution. He's not scrambling. He's not reacting. He's plotting. Every step he takes is deliberate, every conversation calculated, every silence strategic. Behind his composed demeanor lies a mind operating 5 moves ahead, already envisioning the chessboard in a different color, Ferrari red. What's unfolding is not some impulsive exodus. It's a meticulously prepared transition toward what he sees as the defining opportunity of his lifetime. Red Bull gave him a throne. Ferrari offers him the chance to carve his name into racing mythology. Inside the walls of Milton Keynes, there's a subtle tremor. It's not yet public, but those paying close attention can sense it. Team members with long-tenured loyalty are suddenly speaking in more guarded tones. Conversations end with glances over the shoulder. Schedules shift without explanation. Meetings move behind locked doors. There's a sense that something foundational is about to shift, and the epicenter is Horner himself. He isn't walking out the door alone. He's taking with him the very spine of the empire he built. The people who've stood with him through glory and controversy. The engineers who turned impossible concepts into aerodynamic breakthroughs. The strategists who rewrote how race wins are orchestrated. The technical wizards whose fingerprints are on every piece of championship silverware Red Bull has hoisted under his leadership. And they're not hesitating. They're not second-guessing. They're aligning. A select group, some of the most respected minds in Formula One's engineering circles, have already indicated their intention to follow him to Italy. Not when it's convenient. Not if things go well. The moment the curtain is pulled back and the announcement becomes official, they're in. Completely. One veteran aerodynamicist, known within the team for his blunt realism and zero tolerance for fluff, summed it up in a private message that's now being quietly repeated behind the scenes. This isn't about changing jobs. This is about rewriting what we leave behind. These are not words spoken lightly. These are professionals who've achieved everything the sport has to offer, yet they're chasing something more. Something deeper than victory laps and bonuses. Because this is legacy. This is about daring to take on the most iconic, the most scrutinized, the most emotionally loaded brand in racing history, and turning it into an unstoppable force once more. Not with nostalgia. Not with fairy tales. But with discipline, vision, and ruthless excellence. Horner sees Ferrari not as a romantic challenge, but as the ultimate proving ground. A labyrinth of internal politics, entrenched tradition, and relentless expectations. A place where careers go to wither. And yet, for him, it's the mountain he's always known he would eventually climb. He doesn't want to be another statistic of failure in Maranello. He wants to be the anomaly. The one who cracked the code. Because winning with Red Bull cemented his reputation as a top-tier operator. It made him a figurehead of modern motorsport dominance. But leading Ferrari back to glory? That's transcendence. That's immortality. That's the kind of success that outlives the man himself. It's the kind of triumph that gets whispered in future boardrooms and debated by historians. The kind that places your name alongside the great architects of the sport, not just as a champion, but as a force who reshaped destiny. Horner isn't intoxicated by fame. He's driven by legacy. By the weight of achievement that doesn't fade. By the allure of doing what so many others have tried, and failed, to accomplish. He knows full well the risks. The obstacles. The resistance. He's studied the internal dysfunctions, the cultural rigidity, the national pride that sometimes becomes a barrier instead of a banner. He's prepared. Not to blend in, but to impose structure. To enforce clarity. To build a machine as ruthless as it is refined. He's not walking into Ferrari to please the tifosi with charm. He's arriving with a plan to return their beloved team to ruthless dominance, even if it means tearing down the familiar and replacing it with something alien, something engineered for modern war. And those who've joined him? They're not followers. They're believers. They're staking their careers on the bet that Horner doesn't miss. That where he goes, greatness is not a possibility, it's a pattern. Their move isn't about changing scenery. It's about sculpting history. It's about becoming the architects of a revolution that transforms Ferrari from a nostalgic symbol into a merciless powerhouse once again. They're not afraid of the heat. They crave it. Because they know that true greatness doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from diving headfirst into the chaos and emerging with something unshakable. For Horner, this isn't the end of a chapter. It's the beginning of a campaign. A conquest. A final climactic act that could make every championship with Red Bull look like a prelude. He's not trading a winning formula for sentimentality. He's pursuing the one frontier he's yet to conquer. He's choosing to gamble not with his job, but with his legacy. And in his eyes, it's no gamble at all. It's a calculated strike. A move that, if executed to perfection, won't just change Ferrari. It will redefine what it means to be a team principal in the modern era of Formula One. Because if he pulls this off, if he takes Ferrari from fractured to formidable, from hopeful to historic, Christian Horner will not just be remembered. He will be revered. Not merely as the man who ruled Red Bull, but as the visionary who walked into the lion's den and taught it how to hunt again. The entire Formula One ecosystem stands frozen in a moment of unbearable suspense, as if the very fabric of the sport has paused, bracing itself for an announcement that threatens to append decades of tradition, alliances, rivalries, and long-established hierarchies. In boardrooms tucked away from media scrutiny, in data centers humming beneath the circuits, in corridors where whispers travel faster than radio waves, a truth is slowly blooming, unstoppable, irreversible, and utterly game-changing. The rumors have grown teeth. The theories have started to solidify. The questions that once lingered in hushed tones now echo in frantic voices behind closed doors. And still, the official word has not arrived. But it doesn't need to. Everyone in the inner circle can already feel the shift. The momentum has turned. The countdown has silently begun. This is no ordinary personnel movement. It's not a technical director quietly switching allegiances or an engineer seeking fresh horizons. This is a fundamental redefinition of power in the world's most elite motorsport. The invisible hands that have sculpted championship winning machines, orchestrated race day masterclasses, and driven one of the most dominant team dynasties in the sport's recent memory. Those very hands are preparing to shake the foundations of their own creation. The figure who shaped the aerodynamic revolution that left competitors gasping in futile pursuit is about to exchange allegiances in the most shocking, theatrical, and symbolic fashion imaginable. The paperwork has already been completed. The fine print has been dissected, amended, and signed with a kind of discretion reserved for geopolitics and high finance. The lawyers have stepped aside. The negotiations are over. The ink has dried. What remains is timing, an impeccably calculated revelation that will detonate like a bomb in the heart of the paddock, leaving no team, no driver, and no analyst untouched by its implications. And yet, the masterminds behind the scenes have opted for silence, allowing tension to stretch to the breaking point, knowing that anticipation itself amplifies the magnitude of the moment that is about to arrive. Those in the know are no longer guessing. They are strategizing. They're simulating scenarios, constructing new contingency frameworks, recalibrating long-term goals, and quietly aligning budgets for an arms race that is about to escalate beyond anything the sport has seen in decades. Sponsors are hovering in wait, media executives are preparing emergency segments, and rivals are reviewing every clause in their contracts, every performance clause, every poaching prevention, every retention bonus. Because what's about to happen is not just about design philosophy. It's not merely about CFD data, wind tunnel percentages, or cornering balance. It's about influence, culture, aura, psychological warfare. The mastermind who redefined what dominance looks like, who oversaw the development of machinery so efficient and so superior that it sometimes seemed to bend the laws of physics, is on the verge of trading the navy and crimson for the deep, iconic crimson of Italy's most legendary racing institution. But this isn't just about a man changing jobs. This is about the convergence of ambition, legacy, and timing. It's about a legendary brain deciding that its final frontier is to resurrect the sleeping lion, to return the prancing horse to a level of prestige and supremacy it hasn't enjoyed since the days of bulletproof reliability and strategic perfection. It's about rewriting the final chapters of an already peerless legacy with a pen dipped in scarlet ink. Inside Ferrari's hallowed headquarters, the transformation has already begun. Departmental structures are being dismantled. Rigid hierarchies are being dissolved. New workflows are emerging. Innovation, long stifled by outdated bureaucracy, is now being injected with a fresh, almost aggressive vitality. Meetings once filled with excuses are now charged with expectation. The entire factory is being reprogrammed for excellence, and not just in car design. This overhaul stretches across pit strategy, development cadence, simulator feedback loops, driver integration, and the very core of decision-making protocol. The man leading this revolution doesn't just demand results. He institutionalizes them. He re-engineers the concept of possible. Back in Milton Keynes, a quiet turbulence is starting to take hold. The departure of such a pivotal force, someone whose vision built the foundations of Red Bull's hegemony, is more than a vacancy. It's a spiritual blow. One does not simply substitute genius. You can replace titles, but not instinct. You can promote roles, but not legacy. The engineers left behind now face a future clouded with uncertainty. Will the culture that defined their rise remain intact? Can the machine continue running without its architect? Or will the vacuum pull at the very seams of what made them great? And if that wasn't dramatic enough, consider the optics. The very soul of Red Bull's technical excellence moving into the heart of their most ancient, emotionally charged rival. This is more than betrayal. This is the kind of seismic maneuver that ignites decade-long feuds, that becomes legend, that splits fan bases and reshapes loyalties. The mastermind isn't just taking his intellect to Maranello. He's bringing disruption, momentum, and above all, a message. A message that Ferrari is no longer content with nostalgia. That the Italian giants aren't here to participate. They are here to ascend. To conquer. To obliterate mediocrity. Meanwhile, Formula One's theater of speculation is reaching a boiling point. Every delay in the announcement sends the rumor mill into overdrive. Is the delay part of a larger, layered strategy? Is there another twist we haven't seen yet? Could this mastermind be pulling strings beyond the visible chessboard, reshaping more than just the technical future of a team, but perhaps the commercial and political terrain of the sport itself? When the moment finally arrives, when the lights dim, the microphones switch on, and the world hears confirmation from the very lips of Ferrari's leadership, there will be no going back. No undoing. No downplaying. The landscape of Formula One will be irreversibly altered. Rivals will scramble to respond. Strategic alliances may fracture. Some may copy, others may innovate, but none will be able to ignore. The brain behind one of the greatest dynasties in the sport's modern era has chosen to switch allegiances in the most dramatic and symbolic way possible. A shift that doesn't just suggest ambition, it screams it. A move that isn't motivated by money or ego, or even revenge, but by a need to redefine greatness one final time, in the most challenging, poetic, and historic setting imaginable. The man who engineered perfection in dark blue is about to chase immortality in red. And when he does, Formula One will never look, or feel, the same again.